Hello, and welcome to a movie review podcast. I'm your host, DeoxysPrime, and joining me on this podcast, we got Mule,
Salutations.
we got Frank,
What's up, guys?
and we got Matt.
Hi.
And so this podcast, we kind of figured it. We don't do many of these movie review stuff, but
Since the film is so shit, we're going to talk about it.
a film of this magnitude, maybe just enough cause for discussion here. So today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens.
Otherwise known as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope.
We'll get to that. So yeah, just in case it's not going to be already clear, this podcast will have spoilers for the movie. So if you don't already know that Han Solo was killed by his son Kylo Ren, you should not listen to this podcast.
Go to this time to see our spoilerless impressions.
Yeah, there won't be any end of those. So if you're in, you're in. So I figured we could probably start this discussion off with just some brief general impressions of what we thought of the movie. For me specifically, I'll just say I thought this movie was okay. Not great, not bad, although in the days since having gone see it, there's certainly a lot of issues that I've thought more about that maybe have kind of lowered my opinion a bit, but overall I still think it's okay. If you wanted a quote from me to put on the back of the box, it would be this, in an age where everything is either the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. This is a movie that strives to be okay and achieves it. Mule, how did you feel about it?
Okay, well, The Force Awakens is kind of interesting that it's a very sloppily made movie in the sense that not a lot of stuff actually fits together when you actually put any real thought into it, which is very kind of par for the course for J.J. Abrams, but I digress.
We'll get into that.
But yeah, the thing I do notice is that it does have a nice pace to it. It always ramps up the action right when you're kind of expecting something other than, let's say, I guess character moments. It always has certain scenes that kind of just build upon what's coming prior. Everything with Finn is pretty good in the sense he goes from being this kind of fucking coward to being a guy who stands up against what is effectively the modern equivalent of a Sith Lord. So that's pretty neat for what it is.
Okay. So as a whole, what would you say your overall opinion of it would be?
Disregarding what we're going to get into later, I would say it's a weak Star Wars film, but as a film itself, it is perfectly watchable.
Okay. Perfect. Frank, why don't you give us your general impressions?
Okay, so to prepare for this movie, I had never seen the entire Star Wars series in full. I had basically just seen everything in bits and pieces up until around last week.
Okay,
and
Funk.
With this highly anticipated movie on the horizon, I was like, you know what? Let me just, get the meme movies out of the way.
Meme movies?
Yeah, right. Because I really didn't go in there expecting that much. I was like, you know what? This isn't really going to pioneer anything new for me. I know everything that happens. I know that, this is what sets forth the science fiction genre of movies, more or less. But, I really didn't anticipate liking any of them that much. And I was correct. I wasn't impressed by a lot of it. I laughed a lot at episode 3 when he's all it's over, Anakin, I have the high ground. And when he killed the younglings and shit. Those were when Mace didn't do nothing, was thrown out the window and he got sheep shocked.
Listen, we can go over all the memes another time for the other movies.
That's what I enjoyed.
They are somewhat pertinent to this.
Yeah, that's what I really liked about them. So I was like, you know what? We're gonna go into these movies, see how they compare to the prequels and to the original trilogy in terms of how I, the casual Star Wars enjoyer, would, get a kick out of it. And I have to say, even though it was pretty much a blatant rehash of a ton of tropes in the original trilogy that more or less kind of set out to ignore the prequels, I still enjoyed it a pretty fair bit. I thought that Finn was an excellent character. when he was paired up with Poe, which didn't happen enough during the movies. They had a really good relationship that I feel like wasn't really established in the slightest. There were a lot of moments in there that were blatantly put in there just to evoke a reaction from the longtime fans, like when they're running to the ship and they're like, "Why don't we use that ship?" And they're like, "It's garbage." And the garbage is the Millennium Falcon, because obviously, why the fuck wouldn't it be? And then there's the whole thing on the bridge, and it's like, oh, a bridge scene. Everyone knows that every important thing in Star Wars happens on a bridge, so naturally this is going to be really important. And sure enough, that's where Kylo Ren kills his father, Han Solo.
So speaking of that scene,
well, let's not get into it too much just yet, but
yeah, we'll get there soon enough.
But you did like
it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot as a film. Like as someone who's not necessarily a really huge Star Wars fan, I went in there and I did really like it. There were a lot of things that I came out of it wishing they would change a little bit. Some things that I think I probably would have enjoyed more had they did a couple of more slight revisions here and there. But I did enjoy it for the most part. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. It wasn't anything stellar, because it really didn't delve into any new territory whatsoever. But I did like it.
Okay, so that's definitely a very different perspective than what I and maybe Mule have on this movie. Matt, how about you? What did you come into this expecting, and what did you think of it?
I was expecting a decent movie, and I got a decent movie.
Is it nice when that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly had no expectations for this, because I'm not really a Star Wars fan myself. Like I like Empire a lot, and then that's pretty much it. A New Hope is a good movie. I don't remember any of the other movies because it's been like over a decade since I watched them. I watched them all when I was a little kid. The prequels especially as well. I don't remember anything from the prequels other than what is seen in the Plinkett reviews. All I know is I recall myself being not like pretty bored by the first two and then liking the third one. But the original trilogy, I remember it enough that I think I could probably compare it. But I will say, even it was a good movie. That's like just before not getting into anything. It was good. It wasn't great. Kind of like Frank said, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. It's not something that really deserves a 95% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes, as it has right now, I believe. But it's good.
Okay, fair enough. I think expectations play a lot into what people think about this movie. It's weird because, like, this movie was announced, like, 3 years ago when Lucas sold off the franchise to Disney. And, like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And at that point, I had long since, like, come to terms with the fact that, like, there was never going to be a sequel trilogy because Lucas clearly had no interest in making one. So after episode 3, I was like, I enjoyed those 6 movies. I love Star Wars. Like, I'm fine if they never make another one. So when they did announce that they're making, like, new ones, I didn't really have too much excitement for it. Over, like, the past 3 years, I kind of kept my expectations in check, especially after they announced that Abrams would be directing it. Because I really, really hated, to varying degrees, his fucking Star Trek reboot movies.
Because they're nothing like Star Trek at all.
Yes, but, like, Star Wars is a little different because, like, whereas he was never a fan of Star Trek and made those movies, he was clearly a big fan of Star Wars, and that's why he wanted to make this movie. So that's fair, and I'll give him credit for that at least. But it's like I did not want to get excited for this movie, and I did mention this, like, in the CT, where it's like as soon as I got in the movie and the opening crawl starts, that really hit me. Like, oh shit, I'm actually watching a new Star Wars movie in theaters, which was, like, kind of a big deal because it didn't used to come around all that often. But I think a lot of people, I don't know if, like, they had high expectations, but it was kind of different from the expectations they had of the prequels, where I think people were they wanted, like, a solid Star Wars movie that was very similar to the original trilogy movies. And that's exactly what they got, and that's kind of what frustrates me, because I think a lot of people are not looking at this movie with a more critical eye. They were just kind of satisfied that this was like a nostalgic throwback to the original trilogy movies, and that's it. Whereas I kind of like have like a higher standard for what I want a Star Wars movie to be. So that when this movie came under that, like that's what frustrated me when I got out of this movie, that it was something I had already seen before and offered really nothing new to as both a movie and as a piece of Star Wars fiction. This doesn't really offer anything new.
It is kind of ridiculous too, because like the prequels like got torn to shreds like critically and like basically every which way. Like, well, this is just given a pass for being entirely middle of the road in every sense.
It's funny because I've seen a few people say that, like, well, I still don't like the prequels, but I kind of respect them a bit more because they tried something. Like, they tried to do something new and different. Whereas I think the reason a lot of people didn't like those movies is because they went in expecting movies that were similar to the original trilogy and got something that was, like, very tonally different and structured story-wise very different. And just people didn't like that. They liked what was familiar to them.
They're probably also expecting good acting.
Well, that's true, but like if you go back and watch the original trilogy movies, they are not very well acted either. Like the bad acting is a kind of charming in this sense. I think it's clear that like Star Wars has very good actors in them, but I think they do kind of act below their level. It's just it's basically what Lucas wanted, and you can say whatever you want about that. But the original trilogy movies are not well acted. This new movie is not very well acted either. They're all kind of on the same ground as that, as far as I'm concerned.
Like, it's kind of funny how like people look at like the prequels as like poorly acted. And, well, yes, they are poorly acted. Like you have like Luke basically just hamming up the entire original trilogy.
Yeah, like, and like there's like when Luke, it's charming in a lot of the scenes where he's clearly out of his league, acting alongside some of these other people who are like established actors, like Alec Guinness and stuff like that. Yeah, fucking
Alec Guinness, like right next to him, just
but like I just, in terms of like things that matter most to me, good acting is kind of low on the bar for a Star Wars movie. It's just like if you can act the part, act what Star Wars movies have always been, that's fine with me.
Like, what I did notice that bugged me, like, really bugged the shit out of me for this film was, like, the prequels, like, did at least, like, try to establish some sort of world building that the prior films didn't really do to quite the same extent. Like, we got to understand Tatooine quite a bit over, like, 2 films, but we never really got to understand, like, the galaxy at large or, like, the Empire or the Rebels, like, at all. Like, it was just like, oh, hey, here's the Empire, here's the Rebels, root for the Rebels, and it was like, well, that's great.
It's a very simple story at its
core.
But
like, I just couldn't really find myself caring about anyone other than like the main characters in any of those situations. Like, I didn't really care if the Rebels actually won or not. I just cared if like Luke and friends made it out. Like, and that's something the prequels kind of like actually like really improved upon because like they added context to shit. Like, and this film just doesn't do that. It's just like, oh, hey, here's the Resistance now. They were just Rebels, the different name. Oh, there's somewhere a
here's the First Order. It's exactly the same as the Empire, basically.
Yeah,
it's clear. It's clear. Everything in this movie is clearly meant to emulate something in the original movies and do nothing really more with it.
It's like, oh, hey, there's apparently a fucking New Republic out there, but we're just gonna blow them the fuck up instead of actually explain anything about the politics. Which is infuriating because like it was interesting to see the like inner workings of shit in the prequels, like seeing how shit gets done.
I'll give you a second to say what you want to say in a moment, Matt. But there is one thing I wanted to add to that because that was a point I kind of felt watching this movie, is that this movie is so dedicated to emulating the original trilogy because the original trilogy had none of that. It was like a very simple story that like ignored a lot of the stuff that was happening in the background and just focused on these characters' journey. And in this movie, it tries to do the exact same thing, but because when the original movies came out, there wasn't a big universe, there wasn't a ton of baggage that those movies had. They kind of had to establish everything themselves. Whereas this movie has 6 previous movies that have added to the universe, and because it ignores parts of it, like Mule said, you're introducing these new things without enough context. Where it's like, okay, so you have the resistance, right? But the movie doesn't really explain why there's a resistance and why they're a separate group from the Republic, which is the government in that movie, and what any of that means. And like, to actually understand what's going on, you have to like read stuff outside of the movie, which is never good. The actual backstory is that, like, after Return of the Jedi, where they established the New Republic, the New Republic disbands their army because they don't want to repeat the same mistakes as the Empire. So they don't have like an army to fight the First Order, and Princess Leia hates that, so she forms like her own splinter military apart from the actual government. And that's not made clear at all because they just want to ignore all that other stuff. But I mean, that's context that, like, while I was watching the movie, I was asking myself those questions, and the movie wasn't giving me answers.
That's kind of interesting, because I know when watching the movie, one thing I noticed was that one thing I didn't like very much was that the pacing seemed really erratic. It's like, okay, we're here, and then, oh, all of a sudden we're here now, and now we're here, and now we're here, and now we're here, and we're just bouncing to all these different places with, like, action scenes to transition between them, and I'm just like, can we, like, slow it down a bit and let Star Wars happen? Let me see these locations. Let me actually see these environments and what these different people are like. What these different planets do. It's like all of a sudden we're at the Rebel base, and then all of a sudden we're doing Death Star again, and I'm just like, what happened in this movie?
Yeah, like, it's very, very fast-paced compared to all the other Star Wars movies. The only time the movie really takes a break to, like, give you, like, any sort of sense of setting is on Jakku when we meet Rey and we see what kind of her daily life is like on that planet. That's the only time the movie takes a breath, and then it's just like zoom right from there, like right off of that moment.
Yeah.
But you're totally right. Like, other than Jakku, can you guys like name any of the planets that were in this movie? Because I sure as hell can. Because the movie never
planet.
The movie never took like
Star Killer planet.
The Star Killer base, but it's not even really the name of the planet.
Totally not Hoth.
Yeah, it's like
totally not Tatooine.
The movie, like, the names of these planets are kind of like one throwaway line, if that. We're like, we don't really get any chance to understand where we are and what this like planet means to anything. The funniest, like, I don't say funniest.
I don't even remember the name of like because they said that the one that was housing the Resistance base. They said the name of that planet like maybe like 3 times. Like,
yeah, because I don't even remember it. It's like, but
it's like Dakar or something like that.
Yeah, but it's like the other movies made like a very notable effort to establish what this planet is early on and kind of repeat the name a lot, so you get a sense of the setting. But the weirdest part of this movie is that, like, halfway through the movie, when the Star Killer base is used for the first time and they destroy that planet means nothing in the grand scheme of things to what we like are kind of seen in the movie. But there's kind of a throwaway line that planet is the current seat of the Republic. Mm-hmm. But it's just like,
they like try to mention that it's like, the Republic, like, they blew up like 5 planets, and it's like, oh, these are like the Republic's army planets, and it's like, you could have mentioned it before.
It was such a throwaway planet that, like, again, I went up and looked online afterwards, like, what is this planet's name? What is its significance? And I mean, it turns out like that planet means nothing in the grand scheme of things because the New Republic rotates its capital throughout many planets.
Oh, then who even gives a shit?
Basically. But there's a very good comparison, and I think we'll be doing this a lot between this movie and A New Hope, because in A New Hope, we also have a situation where the bad guys blow up a planet, but that planet is introduced as Alderaan, the home planet of one of the main characters. So already you have like somewhat of an emotional attachment to what happens to that planet, and you can sort of see in like Leia's expression when it gets blown up, like the pain that it causes her. And then immediately after, you have a scene where you have Obi-Wan reacting to like how horrifying an event that was, and like he gives like one of the most iconic lines in the movie, and it's like you can tell how important an event that was. Where in this movie, it's like they blow up the planet, no one reacts to it, no one mentions it ever again. It was so weird.
What gets me is how like they just kind of throw the fucking new Death Star in like out of like the left field like halfway through the film. Actually, more like 2/3 through the film, because like they basically make no mention of it in the first act of the film. There's no real like sense of any sort of tension there regarding any sort of super weapon until we get to the forest planet.
Yeah. Let me talk a bit about
Fake
that.
Mos Eisley.
Fake Mos Eisley. Well, yeah, everything is just a clear stand-in for something that was in that like one of the 3 original movies. But there was a very important point I wanted to make, because I think like this was the thing that like nagged at me the most, and like I like when I think about maybe this movie's biggest problem, it's this, and it's that it's a really good example of poor screenwriting, where the first half, as Mule kind of like led on to there, the first half of this movie and the second half of this movie are completely disconnected from one another. They're kind of only tangentially related in the way they tie together, and the reason I mention that is because the movie starts off with this idea that this droid has these this location to Luke Skywalker, and finding Luke Skywalker, the bad guys want him and the good guys want to find him as well, and it's like it's made to be this important event. The movie's first half is structured around finding Luke Skywalker, and then like they finally get the plans, or sorry, the star chart to the rebels, and it's like that plot point is immediately given up. It's like they hit a dead end, and that's it. And it's super weird that you're like this driving force of the first half of the movie has zero connection to what happens in the latter half of the movie, and it's kind of made especially weird when you consider the fact that the bad guys really had no reason to go and look for Luke Skywalker, because the other characters make it abundantly clear he's given up essentially being a Jedi. He has no plans to train like new Jedi, because he apparently fucked up so hard with Kylo Ren that he's like, I can't do this anymore. So he exiles himself to a far corner of the galaxy where he poses like no one a threat, and like still like the First Order is obsessed with finding him, which kind of sets in motion their own demise in this movie. And it's frustrating from like a storytelling standpoint, because again, you can compare this very easily to A New Hope, where it starts off the same way, where you have this droid carrying these important plans, and the first half of the movie is about getting the droid into the hands of the good guys. But once they do, they like those plans have relevance to the final act. Was like they find the weaknesses of the Death Star, and they go and destroy it, and that sets up the film's final act. Whereas this one, it's like you have these plans, and it goes through the motions of convincing you that they're important to the plot, and then just gives them up. And the second half is set up like how conveniently you have this one guy who knows the location of the base and knows its weak spot right there with you. It's just like it's really, really poor storytelling.
Another thing that gets me is like in A New Hope, like there's a lot of build up around the Death Star itself that isn't just like it blowing up shit. It's like they go through the Death Star, like they basically brave like the dangers inside. And basically the entire thing is basically just a fucking death trap for anyone who's not Imperial in there. And like you barely get any sense of the threat of Starkiller Base in this film. It's just like, oh hey, we have to go there to rescue Rey. Oh wait, she got out herself.
They walk in and there's almost no stormtroopers around.
Yeah, there's no stormtroopers. There's no actual threat. It's just like, oh hey, here's this big laser.
That scene, the probably the stupidest scene in the whole movie that I thought. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into Rey yet.
We'll have a section for Rey in a bit.
Yeah, just bring up the scene you want to talk about, and we can splinter off if it happens.
Okay, because you might know what I'm talking about regarding Rey.
I mean, there are a lot of bad scenes with Rey, but I definitely want to hear which one you think was the worst.
Well, I'll just mention it's the part where she escapes and she uses the Force to escape. the fuck, like where she just suddenly knows how to use the Force.
Oh,
where she mind tricks Daniel Craig into letting her out.
Was that Daniel Craig?
That's Stormtrooper Daniel Craig. Yeah.
God.
Yeah, Rey. It's weird. It's
Bro,
weird.
okay, first of all, let me headline this discussion by saying I don't want to hear any sexist remarks in here. I don't want to hear anyone complaining that she's a Mary Sue. None of that shit. No female derogatory terms in this podcast. Absolutely not. I ain't having shit.
So Rey is probably the worst Mary Sue in fictional history in like recent years.
For those who don't know what like a Mary Sue is, it's basically just a character who is arbitrarily fucking perfect and loved by everyone, which she is.
More or less, yeah.
Bro, you only don't like her because she's female, bro. If she was a male, you would not be having any of this shit. There would be no debates about whether or not Rey is a good character or not. It would all just be hand-waved. You're only giving her so much shit because she's a female Jedi, and that messes with your precious male ego. Get that shit out of here.
I would like to mention that Frank's view does not represent the views of the rest of the Sniper. But like as Frank kind of alludes to, there's like a big discussion, or at least there should be, about this character. She's kind of being lifted up kind of artificially as this great female lead, and I think everyone kind of wanted her to be that so much that they can't admit that she's not. And it's like, don't get me wrong, it'd be better if she was. I think there was a lot of potential in this character, and I still think future movies could address this and fix the problems with her.
I mean, Steve,
they made no attempt to make her an actual character.
Certainly there's a lot of potential with the character when there's no actual character there to begin with.
Yeah, she's a complete black hole of charisma.
She has no personality at all.
And every time she does have a little bit of personality, like, it's drowned out by like something else.
Drowned out by Finn being way more charismatic.
Well, here's the thing, like, every time she opens her mouth, like, it's like kind of contradictory with something she says later on. So it's weird.
Not only what she says is contradictory, what she does is contradictory to her character. Like, she says here, like, she just wants to stay on the fucking dirt ball.
Yeah, and fucking Jakku waiting for someone that will never show up.
And then she decides, like, oh, we're just going to help out this droid and have him taken to another planet because...
Yeah, what even was the point of that scene of her running away? Because she runs away...
Yeah, after she sees the lightsaber?
But then she just fights anyway. And it's like, okay. Like, she sees the vision and she's like, I don't want to fight! Runs off into the woods.
It's because it has to parallel the traditional hero's journey, which is obligated to have a refusal of the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it clearly was not handled very well.
It was not handled well at all. It was very silly.
Like, the problem with Rey's character inherently is that they try to basically make a character who is like completely refusing the call and place her into a Luke role. Like, the entire character of Luke in the original trilogy was like, he was actually super gung-ho to go on adventures and shit, but he was just completely ineffectual.
Yeah, the thing about Luke is, like, he's pretty much a nothing character. The only thing he's good at, and the movie does make great pains to set this up, is that he's a good pilot, which pays off in, like, the one good thing he does in those movies. Pretty much any other time he gets in a conflict, like, he gets either his ass beat, or someone has to come in and save him. And, like, even at the end of the trilogy, he only wins because Darth Vader let him win. And Darth Vader was the one who beat the Emperor. It's just like, they take great pains to... And, I mean, it sounds like we're shitting on Luke, but, I mean, that's part of his charm.
That's what makes him a great character, though.
That's what makes him a character.
He's actually fallible.
He is, yes. And... It's one of those things where it's like, okay, if you want to rehash that first movie so hard, all you're going to do is draw the inevitable comparisons even harder. So, like, when you have a character who's trying to be Luke, it's like you have a better character already to compare with. So when you fuck up, like this is what you get. You get Rey.
Well, when you make a whole movie that's essentially just a copy of the first movie, you're gonna get.
Now, the problem with Rey inherently is that, as I said before, she's a character who doesn't actually want to go on an adventure, and she doesn't want to actually do anything, which doesn't make sense with the when she like decides, oh hey, let's go help this droid go to another world to deliver this message.
Why
And
didn't she
also...
sell the droid to begin with? Like,
Yeah,
she had no reason not to sell it.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Why did she suddenly get in the span of 5 minutes an emotional attachment to this droid that she never met before, and clearly did not seem to even like that much until all of a sudden she was like, you know what? I want to be a good person because this droid totally has emotions and isn't just a fucking robot.
Yeah, it's just a clear case of like we need to speed through this to get to the running chase scene, so that we can get to the other running chase scenes later on in the movie. It's just like they wanted. I hate to keep going back to this point, but like there was such a clear attempt to make her a quote unquote strong female character that it just came off hollow. It's like the ultimate try hard thing. Like, you tried so hard to do it that, like, you didn't pay attention to what you were doing. To the point where they had that one scene where it's like poor Finn is just trying to help this woman, and she's like, get your hands off me, I don't need your help.
I will say this about that scene, because I'll defend the whole thing with him holding her hand and she get off me, because here's the thing. They were trying to get the fuck away from these fucking ships blowing the fuck out of everything. Here's this random dude you don't know trying to guide you where to go, holding your hand. It's like, bitch, I know this fucking planet. Get off me. I'm gonna go where I know where to go. Like,
there are better ways to handle that than what they did, though.
I know. I understand that. I think it was kind of silly how they did that during this like super like that did not need to be in the movie.
It breaks the tension of the scene.
It did not need to be in the movie at all. That shouldn't have been there in the first place. And it was still dumb, but I think people are making too much of a stink about it. But
I mean, it's not the main issue, but it's like it's one issue of a larger puzzle that makes up this awful character.
Yeah, like
how she can somehow fix the Millennium Falcon better than fucking Han Solo can, or how she can pilot the Falcon.
I actually didn't get that from the movie. Like, she like solved a problem that Han Solo couldn't solve in the Falcon. I don't know.
They clearly wanted to make...
That happened.
They clearly wanted to make an attempt to have her bond with Han Solo. It's just they just do it in the most like quick, ham-fisted way possible.
Yeah,
I guess the way. I guess just to be devil's advocate, it was like he never really viewed that ship as like, at least until, you know, oh, we're home, Chewie. Like in the original movies, like he never really seemed to have much of an attachment to the ship that much, other than this is a pretty good ship. He was
actually very defensive of the ship.
Yeah, he was very defensive of the ship.
Okay, maybe I'm remembering.
But that's not... Well, I mean, the larger point is that she came onto this ship with no experience and basically fixed everything right away.
Yeah.
With no struggle. It's like, oh, well, I know what the problem is, I'm going to fix it. And then Han's like, I'm okay, and then she fixes it. But I mean,
it could also be that he's just old and doesn't remember. I don't know.
We'll get to Han, but I mean, like the biggest problem, if you want to just go to the biggest problem with Rey, is this, like, they clearly want to make her the next Luke, so she's got to be the Jedi. And the thing about Luke again is that Luke took like 2 movies to be a somewhat competent Jedi, and even then, like, his training was so incomplete. Like, he just wasn't he wasn't really a full Jedi, but he represented what the Jedi stood for.
Like,
but that took him 2 whole movies to get to, and, like, even in the interim between episodes 4 and 5, there's 3 years between that, and you see at the beginning of episode 5, like, he still, struggles to force pull that lightsaber out of the snow, and then this scene has that exact parallel, where she does it with almost no problem. She pulls it, like, 10 meters away, and just, like, automatically, without ever using a lightsaber before, is like almost super competent at it, and then she solves the problem by beating the bad guy of just she concentrates and summons the Force, and that makes her good at lightsaber combat, which is totally against everything Star Wars has ever been. It's like being good at lightsaber combat isn't about using the Force, it's about training in lightsaber combat. So
So much so that like she's able to very, very handily beat this Sith guy who has been training for years under this very prestigious knightly order. Like, I
And
mean,
also
we don't
Luke
really we don't
himself.
really get to know
Luke
much about
himself.
like the Knights of Ren or whatever the hell. But like we get the opinion that like they're very, very prestigious and they're really I don't know, like the fact that he's one of these Knights of Ren so much that he discarded his own name and became Kylo Ren is this huge deal.
Instead
And
of Kylo Ben.
yeah, but like he's able to, I don't know, like Rey just beats him so handily that it's almost like a non-issue, which is very upsetting to me because like I get that he was fucking injured and shit. I get that he was shot, like, but he was just beaten so goddamn easily that it's just, I don't know. It really disappoints me.
Yeah, it's just like the scene itself is fine. There's just better ways you could have gone about resolving it.
Yeah. But
Um,
even fucking Finn was getting hits on him too, and like I don't know. And
Like,
I
the
guess
thing
I'll get
is-
into more about Kylo Ren when we actually get to talking about Kylo Ren. But you know,
It's funny that you bring up Finn in that scene because, like, Finn as a character, in his entire like existence in this film, he just kind of shits on like Rey. Like everything he does just makes Rey look like a worse character because he has an actual arc. He is the only character who has, like, aside from the Resistance characters, who has a reason to actually like fight against the First Order or help the droid or do anything. It's like, I mean, he's a cowardly little shit for about half the film, yeah, but like he knows what the First Order is capable of. He's adamantly against it. I mean, sure, like there's some sort of like plot contrivance with like the whole why would he be against it when he should be like basically indoctrinated by that shit at the
he
start.
was raised from birth to be a stormtrooper,
Yeah,
and then just like I do agree there wasn't enough kind of build up to why he just got cold feet right away.
I
Yeah.
will. He did
like-
mention. He did mention that battle was his first battle.
Yeah,
So
but it's like it was kind
I
of a
maybe
bit of a
this
jump.
isn't- yeah, I understand that. Maybe this isn't the first defection of a stormtrooper. I mean, you don't know.
Mm.
The problem is that I guess, like, I mean, maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe I'm thinking more than Abrams did.
I mean, you
about
probably
this.
are. I think
Because
all of
I'm-
us think more
a
than
lot-
Abrams did.
A lot of the complaints I hear, I'm trying to kind of see if I can't try to make a logical reasoning for why that is. Like, one thing, like, to go back to Rey, oh, she's suddenly good with a lightsaber. One thing I was thinking was, well, she was also good with a spear. Maybe that helped her. But I have a feeling that J.J. Abrams did not actually think that far.
No, and that's that. Like you're right, and I can understand that viewpoint. You can explain a lot of things away in this movie like that, but it's very true about Abrams is that like, yeah, he loves Star Wars, but like the established source material and stuff that came before, like that's not his concern in like telling the story of this movie. He'll discard whatever he wants to tell the story he wants, and that's very much what he did in Star Trek. Where he just threw all that shit out the window and pissed off like the hardcore Star Trek fans so much. Whereas this one, there's less of that, but you know, again, that's a clear example of him just like in the moment of this scene, I want this to happen, and logic can take a backseat out of the window for storytelling. But since you guys brought up the character of Finn, I definitely wanted to touch on him because I think he there's an aspect to his character that is helps the movie and also kind of hurts the movie, and that's like his John Boyega plays that role as if he's conscious of the fact that he's in a Star Wars movie. He has such a weird energy and exuberance about him that's unlike any other Star Wars character ever, and it kind of at times it kind of stands out in a bad way. where it's like he goes up to Han Solo and he's like, "You're Han Solo, the war hero."
Yeah.
And it's like you're laying it on a bit thick here, guys. It's like you're like this character is too much of what the audience represents.
In a
But
sense,
it was also very refreshing that
Even
he had such charisma and personality that completely offset Rey's lack of it.
just to add
Oh.
on to that, he also like there were also parts where like where they would blow up a ship and he'd be like woo, and then or like after like a battle, like after the one battle, but when I think Rey was driving and he was shooting at them, and like when they get on the ground, they're just like, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" And it's like,
Yeah.
come on, guys.
It's like that's very much not how people act and talk in a Star Wars movie.
Yeah, he felt. I will say, a lot of the newer characters in this did feel very out of place. Like they did not feel like if you were to stick them in like the original trilogy or
the
the
fucking
prequel
prequels.
trilogy, they would stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I was reading an interview that Abrams did where he talked about how the story was originally going to feature like kind of Luke in the role that Han was, where he's introduced earlier in the movie and he plays a bigger part in the story than nothing at all. But he backed off from that because he felt like Luke's presence would overshadow these new characters.
I mean, he's totally right.
He is right, but at the same time, Han Solo also does the same thing in this movie.
Yeah.
So
He doesn't
it's just
overshadow them at all.
I think he does. I think Harrison Ford's performance is so good that it detracts from everyone else. And that's not to excuse like some of the issues with Finn and Rey's characterization. But like I don't think it would stand out as much as Luke, but I was so enamored with what Harrison Ford was doing in that role that like every time like Rey and Finn were next to him, I'm like, where did these random people wander onto the set from?
Yeah.
Because they stood out so much, especially in that scene where he hid them under the floorboards, and it's like they're like looking up, trying not to get caught by the cameras because they wandered onto the scene accidentally while the Star Wars movie was being shot.
Like, to get back to comparing Rey and Finn again, though, like Finn as a character is interesting, like in how he like basically just makes Rey look like even more shit, in the sense that because he's a character that like actually has a reason to actually dislike the First Order, he just makes Rey stand out so much more. Because like everything he does is like he hates the First Order for the full like from the start to the end.
Mm-hmm.
But like he goes through various phases of like trying to run away, trying to fight. At the end, like he like actually like changes his like patterns and sort of like ideas for how to go about this sort of thing.
He has good character moments.
Yeah, Rey, like just by being associated with Finn perpetually, seemed like is just made so much more bland and so much more awful to view because she at no point has any real reason to fight against the First Order until like the very end. And then like so it makes her entire quest seem kind of pointless really because like why would she help this droid when she can just get a bunch of food? Why would she ever do any of this shit?
Yeah, it feels like she's just along for the ride.
Yeah. Which is awful for a protagonist to like be. Like,
absolutely, and that's the big point. All this movie's marketing leading up to it was supposed to lead you to believe that Finn was the main character,
and he should.
And it was so predictable that like the bait and switch they pulled, where they make Rey the main character and Rey the Jedi. It's like everyone saw that coming, so why did you even bother with it? But again, J.J. Abrams pulled this same shit with Khan in the last Star Trek movie, where he's like, the bad guy's totally not Khan, guys. And then the movie comes out, and he's like, "I'm Khan," and like everyone's like, "Okay, yeah." So, but it's just like the funny thing about that is, if the movie had made like Finn the main character, it would have been so much better.
Yeah,
because after we've had 6 movies of like the Skywalker family being the chosen ones, and I'd be shocked if Rey was not Luke's child. It would have been nice to have this story about this nobody stormtrooper who stumbles into this conflict and just becomes the hero. and that would have been so much more interesting. I can't believe they didn't go for that.
Like, another thing about Finn's characterization, though, like we discussed this earlier, but like the weird sort of energy that like makes him seem like he doesn't really belong in the Star Wars, and like he's actually just like a fan along for the ride, kind of works in a sense because like his character is basically just this kind of sheltered stormtrooper dude. Like,
he's a random nobody, really.
yeah, he's a nobody who's like basically stumbled like into the same area as fucking legends.
Yeah. And that's very much the movie, like the point the movie wanted to try to make, is that like they're treating like Han and Luke as like these mythical characters. But it's also kind of comes off weird because like why would Finn and Rey know who these people are? I mean, like, I get they were famous in the war, but it's like it's a pretty big fucking galaxy. Not every planet's gonna know what exactly happened.
Yeah.
But that's like a minor like nitpick.
I think that works for Finn. Again, it makes Rey seem just like she stands out even more because for Finn, he's been a stormtrooper all of his life. You'd think that he'd probably know like the major setbacks that like Han, Leia, and Luke fucking caused for the Empire.
Yeah.
Like, whereas Rey is just like on this fucking shithole planet and just shouldn't really know anything, and yet she just suddenly knows, oh hey, this is Han Solo, this is Leia. It's like, what the fuck?
The worst thing is like the people who try to defend it that are like, well, I mean, like, I'm sure the next two movies will like fill in the gaps to her character and make it better. And it's like, well, sure, in retrospect that might help, but like it doesn't fix the problems in this movie with her character.
Yeah. As a movie itself, her character is just not good at all. Like, I really do want to talk about the scenes in the Death Star with her, where okay, so never used the Force before, never even touched a lightsaber before, has basically just been told like an hour ago that the Force exists by Han Solo, after years of people thinking it was all myth. And all of a sudden, after getting kidnapped, she's not only able to resist Kylo Ren's mind reading power, but she's also able to read his mind and see that he's afraid of being a shittier Darth Vader. And on top of that, she suddenly is able to mind control a stormtrooper into freeing her.
Which is one of like the more difficult things a Jedi can learn to do.
Yeah, and it's like, how did she do that?
No, it's the Force. That's all that matters.
Is her metachlorian count just that high?
It probably is, but I mean, like, even Anakin Skywalker took some time to learn this shit.
Yeah.
It's just like, again, like, you look at Luke's development over the course of 3 movies, whereas like they jammed all of that, or tried to, with Rey into one movie. Not even
one movie. It's like in the span of like 5 minutes.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, she gets immobilized in the Force, and like next scene she can just suddenly use the Force.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your Mary Sue for you. She's good at everything.
And like, it's funny how you like look at, or how like the film just makes Rey to be just so fucking ridiculously unlikable through like how like perfect she is in like every fucking way, that like it kind of adds to like, say, characters like Kylo Ren who like are actually just fucking working for what they're trying to achieve. It makes you kind of like appreciate like his sort of like wannabe Vader shtick.
Yeah, let's talk about Kylo Ren, because I think he may be the most interesting character, but also maybe the most like wasted potential character in this movie.
I'm so mad about how Kylo Ren was handled. You have no idea.
Well, I mean, we can talk about the best scene in the movie where he takes off his helmet and then it's just funk.
I actually kind of like that, because it reminds me, I can't help but make comparisons. In Twilight Princess with what's that guy? What's the quote unquote? Yeah, like Xanth. Like in the beginning of that game, he seems like the super intimidating Ganondorf type guy, and then he just turns out to be this like crazy, kooky, like crazy dude who's just basically a Ganondorf fanboy.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminded me of that, and everybody shat on that in Twilight Princess.
Well, I didn't, but here's the thing with Kylo Ren.
And I actually kind of like it. Kind of reminded me of that, where it's like, oh, he's just putting on a show. Really,
a face.
In reality, he's just kind of a weakling.
But I like that. I agree with you. I totally love that aspect to him.
I think they should have waited to reveal that, though.
Yes, but here's the thing. I like the fact that he's like clearly mentally unstable. He was clearly not a fully trained Jedi or Sith. He's in this weird in-between point where he doesn't really know what's right and what to do. And as a result, like, when things don't go his way, he has these fucking Anakin Skywalker temper tantrums, which run in the family, clearly. But I like that about him. But at the same time, if you're going... Like, they clearly want him to be the villain for this sequel trilogy. You do need to establish him as a threat, as an intimidating threat to the main characters. And, first of all, like, nothing against the guy who plays him, but, like, he looks like a fucking goofball.
He does.
Like, it's, if you wanted to take off the masks, fine. It's just like, first of all, you did it way too early.
Yeah, for sure.
It was just a really weird, awkward scene when he took off the mask, which I think was part of what they were going for, but just
I
the
don't
way he
think
looks
so.
is too goofball. And it's just like, you not only that, but like when you have him face off again in the end of the movie against these two characters who've never handled a lightsaber before, and he just ends up getting his ass beat. Like, he's not a credible threat.
There's your villain, everybody.
Yeah.
There's your Darth Vader.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is like, you compare him to Darth Vader, and like, when did Darth Vader ever lose? At the end, when he let Luke win.
Yeah.
Like, those movies are so good in like just giving you enough that makes Darth Vader seem like the worst villain ever without actually having him do a lot, which is a very good for an intimidation factor. He's scary. He's threatening. But the villain in this is none of that. And like, even if you're gonna make him like half trained, there are better ways to go about that. It just feels like his character was like completely had so much potential, but they just half-assed it.
Yeah, like it really makes me wonder: is he actually going to end up being like the big villain throughout the whole thing? Like, they clearly had that line that's like, "Bring Kylo Ren back so I can complete his training." Yeah, I almost feel like maybe they'll end up making Snoke like the big bad at the very end.
He's very much the Emperor role in these movies,
but like it's just you can't kick the ass of your main villain, and in the very first movie of a trilogy, like the third of a series, and expect there to be any more tension left. Because now I know, oh, well, fucking, like, sure he was wounded, but still, he still should be able, I mean, he literally, just a second ago, force pushed Rey, like, 20 feet in the air up into a tree. You're seriously gonna tell me that despite all that, he just gets his ass kicked by these two nobodies?
Yeah, it's just like you have a half-trained Sith getting beat by no-training Jedis. It's like, well, what's gonna fucking happen when the Jedis get training?
Not even gonna be a fight.
Yeah, it's frustrating because the movie starts off with him being like actually intimidating, where he freezes that blaster bolt in midair and just continues on the scene without like even having to hold it there.
Yeah,
it just stays there, and that was like a legitimately cool moment. And that was I felt like really the only one he had. Frank,
I'm
it seems like you had more to say about this character.
I'm so upset about Kylo Ren. Okay, like they set him up in the beginning, and he stops a bullet in midair with the Force, and it's like, holy shit, this guy is kind of beast. And then he throws his little fucking temper tantrums here and there, and it's like, oh, all right, so like he's clearly just a kid, is what they're trying to get across here. He's a kid, and he has a lot of aspiration to be like his grandfather. They have that whole like kind of emotional scene where he's talking to Darth Vader's skull, and he's like, "Grandfather, give me guidance and shit."
Yeah,
it's
but
like
I felt that was horribly shoehorned in.
It was
Vader in the movie.
Yeah, like it was
like I'll finish what you started. Well, Vader was the funky henchman. He didn't start or finish anything.
mean, I don't know what kind of opinion he had of Darth Vader.
His opinion is the audience's opinion.
Yeah,
of Vader.
I guess, but like, it's very tough to kind of pin down a proper characterization for Kylo Ren, because it's just like everything else really in this movie. It's pretty all over the place. Like, you have him start off as being really cool, and then right from the second he takes off his mask, like it just goes right downhill from there. And
so, speaking of the point where like Kylo speaks to Vader's mask and says, "Oh, grandfather,"
yeah, right,
whatever. Like, what? So at this point in the series, in the continuity, Vader's a fucking ghost. Why doesn't like Anakin just show up and say, "Stop being a fucking faggot"?
This movie conveniently ignores the existence of Force ghosts.
Yeah.
Even though they're fucking everywhere in both trilogies.
Yeah, and it's like, if you would have given like a one-line explanation of like why the ghosts can't come back and help out,
yeah, that would have
I would have understand. But like in the original trilogy, anytime that like Uncle not Uncle Ben, fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi can show up and give Luke advice, he more or less does, except for the one time he says, "I can't intervene."
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, it's again, yeah, clearly Anakin's a Force ghost. He could have said, "Hey, you're a fucking moron. This isn't what I really wanted." Like, did you miss the end of that last movie where I like went back to the light side? And one of the interesting things about Kylo Ren is that like, whereas you often have the hero being tempted by the dark side, you had a dark side character being kind of sort of being tempted by the light side, and they mention that a number of times, but I don't think they do enough to show that happening. It's like he has a conversation with Snoke about it, and that's it. And it was just like a plot line that like wasn't fully fleshed out that could have added an element of interest to his character.
I wasn't a Snoke.
Another problem, like the story, like in its progression, like kind of inadvertently make for Kylo Ren's character is that okay? So he's trying to be like this Sith dude in the modern era, but the problem is like why? Like, we never have any reason for him to actually, like, want to be, like, on the dark side. Like, it's obviously not working since he's getting his ass kicked by fucking no-name dudes from middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, that wasn't happening at the time. Like,
I mean,
clearly Luke had something to do with it.
Well, there's a lot of, like, I thought this movie had a lot of interesting backstory that should have been in the movie because it was necessary to better establish Kylo Ren's character. They just skim over it.
It's like, okay, there could be something there, but in the context of the film itself, it's just like, the fuck is the point?
I'm sure we're gonna find that out later on, because like they're making a lot of hints to like what the backstory is between him and Luke in particular. So I'm sure we'll have Luke's perspective on why he turned.
Yeah, but I mean that was kind of my point. Is like this movie has a lot of like hints and plot lines that are clearly in there to set up future movies.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole first half of the movie is dedicated to finding Luke.
Right.
And
then the second half of the movie is about something else entirely.
It's just a sequel tease. You spend half the movie on a sequel tease. It's just like, it's really frustrating.
By the way, maybe I missed this when I watched the movie, but how did R2-D2 have the rest of the pieces of the map?
He just did.
Luke gave it to him. Like, they show that in her vision, in Rey's vision, you see Luke with his metal hand on R2, and I think that's clearly meant to be him giving him the coordinates.
Oh, okay.
But it was also kind of stupid that, like, R2 plot device was there the whole time with these plans, and then just at the end of the movie he comes alive and they don't explain why.
Right. Yeah, he had no reason for coming back to life. Like there was nothing prompting that necessarily.
Yeah, it's like the explanation I see is like it was Rey who prompted that, but the movie doesn't explain that.
Yeah, I was gonna say this might be me just overthinking it more and thinking of it more than Abrams did, but I thought it was because like Rey was there and maybe R2 somehow felt that, oh, I can feel Luke's presence.
Do we think that Rey is fucking Luke's daughter? Like that seems to be the general consensus.
There's no way she's not.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's also fucking retarded. It's like we've had enough Skywalkers. Let's focus on someone else. But no.
Maybe she's Sheev's daughter.
And again, like this is another like issue I have as like a Star Wars fan, where episodes 1 through 6 are a complete story, and there are a lot of like things between those movies that don't connect well because they weren't initially written as such. But it was clearly the intent of Lucas that 1 through 6 are a complete story, and because of that, this movie, because it's episode 7, feels like it needs to have those threads that like attach it to that overall story. And one of those would be, again, having a Skywalker be the main character.
Everything has to be connected because
everything has to be
Star
connected
Wars.
to this one family. And it's like, I get it, it's like the Force and mystical shit and all that, but it's like, we've had 6 movies of that. That's fine. That story's done. You could have done something different. And they just, again, rehash everything from those old movies. I did, like, it does seem like we're talking shit about this movie a lot, which is true. There are some things I liked in it a lot, and one of those things was Han Solo. I thought Harrison Ford gave a legitimately good performance, like, probably his best one in a long time. There was no part-time here. Like, he did not phone this in like he did with Indiana Jones. Like, when they announced this movie and that the old characters would be coming back, my first thought was like, how is the mummy of Harrison Ford going to destroy this movie? It's like, he clearly checked out of acting a long time ago, and it was just like, as soon as like that first scene where he comes back in and like he's like being all snarky and stuff, it's like, yeah, he hasn't missed a beat in like 38 years or whatever it's been. It was really refreshing.
He did a really great job.
And I said as much, like, I felt like Harrison Ford saves this movie to a certain extent. Because, like, they picked a good choice for this role. Like, it could have been Luke, but I think, again, Luke would have overshadowed it. It clearly was not going to be fucking Carrie Fisher and whatever ditch they dug her out of for this film.
I actually thought Carrie Fisher did a good job with the material she had.
I mean, like, considering like her cracked out state, and she's clearly not much of an actor anymore, I guess she did the best she could. But like the whole time, like she had this weird thing with her speech that I couldn't place, but it sounded like she had a dick in her mouth the whole movie because she was just mumbling over her lines.
She sounds like a grandma.
She did, and it was like really out of place. Whereas I didn't have that feeling at all with Harrison Ford. It was like he didn't miss a beat.
He really, like, Harrison Ford definitely did feel like it felt like he was an older, maybe like bit more tired and just annoyed Han Solo. Like
yes.
it still felt like Han Solo, that's for sure. Carrie Fisher did not feel like Leia. At all.
No, she did not.
She felt like Leia's grandmother.
Yeah, and like I respect the fact that they got her back for this. Like if she wasn't there, but they had Han and Luke, is like something would have felt missing.
Can we talk about the best performance from Punished Venom C-3PO?
That fucking arm is in there so they can make one joke about it, and that's it. It's
what
why?
What was the
just
joke?
painted gold.
The joke is that, hey, you may not recognize me because of my red arm.
Oh.
Which he says to Han Solo. Which was kind of funny, but...
That completely flew past me.
Yeah, his C-3PO's appearance in this movie was like genuinely charming in the way that character always is.
Was it the same actor?
Yes, yeah. It is Anthony Daniels.
Okay, his voice sounded weird to me. like
I mean,
almost a little too high pitched.
yeah. I mean, he still does the voice of C-3PO in the cartoons as well.
Huh.
So, like, he's clearly never had a problem doing this role.
So Kenny Baker's
Okay.
still in R2D2, right?
No, he's not.
No.
Like, I believe they credited him as, like, a consultant to R2D2 or something like that. But he would, like, unless they put him in, like, for a photo op and that's it, he was not in the, like, actual R2D2 unit.
Why not just
during
stuff him
filming.
in there? I mean, he's gonna probably die somewhere anyway. Might as well be there.
That's a bit harsh.
Jesus fuck.
Let's talk about Luke Skywalker.
What's there to talk about?
Well, the thing is, like, one of the reasons I was the one reason I guess I was actually kind of excited for this movie was to see Luke again, because, like, growing up, Luke Skywalker was, like, one of my childhood heroes in terms of, like, fictional characters or whatever. So I really loved his character in the original movies, bad acting and all. I was excited to see him back, and as frustrating as it was that he's just, like, at the end of the movie and doesn't say a goddamn thing, I do kind of like how they handled that. I thought that the ending scene dragged on a bit too long, where she's holding out the lightsaber to him forever.
That was very awkward.
But it was cool to see him take off the hood, and he looks exactly like I've always wanted him to look, which has the old Obi-Wan look.
Oh yeah.
Where he now takes on that role in the next movie, which I am genuinely excited to see.
Yeah, I thought the ending was good. I kind of like how, like, although I kind of preferred if he would have said something.
Yes,
Even
if it-
just to hear him speak.
Even if
again.
it was just one word, like, as long as it was something. But it definitely made him feel kind of, like, mysterious and powerful, because you could tell what he was thinking just by how he looked. Like,
yeah.
he looked like it. He looked. Just seeing him was a very
I mean, what he was
powerful-
thinking is like, you found my old lightsaber. Did you find my hand with it?
Yeah, like, the ending was good, although it could have been handled better. I remember seeing threads on TV where somebody actually wrote like an ending that would have been better. Where I forget what it was exactly. What, like,
I believe you.
oh my god, I forget what the quote is, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, the ending was awkward, but it was okay. It was a good ending.
I did
Yeah.
find it kind of frustrating how, like, Luke was basically on just, like, the most generic fucking planet ever.
Well,
They
I
were
mean,
just
until
fucking
they
pirates.
reveal that planet is the one from KOTOR.
Yeah. But again, shit that's not in, like, the actual film.
Yes, it would have been nice to explain, like, what the fuck that planet was, other than Ireland.
So, one thing, why is there a map to Luke Skywalker?
Because he left one.
If he didn't want to be found, why would he leave a map?
Yeah, well, again, stuff that'll be explained in future movies, but, like, this is a total nitpick, but that whole map shit was kind of stupid.
It was
Where it's
entirely
like-
pointless, really, other than to have a reason for there to have Luke again.
But it's like the segment of map that they have at the beginning of the movie, like, that's like 1/8 of the entire galaxy.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't have enough to figure out where he is. And then it's like they put it into the rest of the map to figure out where Luke is. And it's just like, how could you not tell what part of the galaxy?
I like how there's a line that leads to this area, and it's like, just look in that area.
Yeah.
Like, there's like, how many planets are there around there? You could probably go to each one in, like, maybe, I don't know, like a day.
Yeah, and this is like very much the J.J. Abrams thing again of I don't give a shit about the details, where it's like you can tell where any part of the galaxy is just looking at the orientations of the stars and stuff like that. It's like a total minor nitpick, but it was just one thing that kind of bugged me while I was watching the movie.
Yeah, I guess another thing is, like, they hype up this Death Star,
And they
And
just
then-
instantly have, like, the
And then
plan to
it's-
destroy it.
and then it's like, in 10 minutes they're like, okay, This is how we do. This is how we blow this thing up. We go to this thing and do the exact same thing we did twice before. Good. Let's go.
Well,
The other stupid thing was, they have this kind of like throwaway line of how the bad guys find the rebel base, and it was like, well, we just tracked someone back to the rebel base. It's like, when the fuck did that happen? There's no way you should have known where that was.
Also, another thing is when they kidnap Captain Phasma, whatever. When they kidnap
You mean
her,
the character that they hyped up so much that did absolutely nothing?
Into the trash she goes.
yeah. When they kidnap her, what they do is they have her turn off the shields by force.
Which she has no reason to agree to, by the way.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, not only does she just do it for them, despite that going completely against what a captain would probably be like normally.
Like, how did she get that high in the ranks having so little loyalty to this organization?
Yeah, and it seems like they just walk up to this random monitor and turn it off. So what you're telling me is that anybody could just turn off this fucking, like, the most important aspect of this giant ship? That anybody with, like, a ranking of captain can just walk up to this monitor and go boop and turn it off, and it's like, oh no, we're fucked. Like,
yeah, it was the weird thing, because, like, you can look at this movie and I think you could easily do a Plinkett style review on all the little things that are wrong with this movie.
yeah.
very.
And then you watch the red letter media half in the bag, and they're like, "Yep, we loved it." It's like, is no one looking at this movie critically?
is
Everyone just satisfied with the fact that it's Star Wars?
I have a feeling that being up until 4 a.m. may have had an effect on them.
Maybe. And it's also like, it's one of those movies that's not good to review right after you watch it.
Exactly.
Because I totally understand the feeling of, wow, we just watched a new fucking Star Wars movie. That was exciting. But I mean, that's the same thing people did after the prequels.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, you know, as much as I will defend them at times, I can understand the criticisms that people have about that. But those criticisms were formed over time. They weren't formed as they walked out of the theater.
Yeah.
And even then, when I walked out of the theater, I thought, like, and I still kind of feel like, this was an okay movie. I don't think I'm going to have much to talk about. But, here we are, however long this podcast has been going. And it's just like, because you stop and think about these things critically.
And it just fucking falls apart.
Sometimes it does. And in this movie, I think it does. And, I'm probably giving people the impression that I hate this movie. I don't.
I mean, I still actually really like, and I really did enjoy watching the film. It's just like, it is, like, compared to, like, a lot of the other Star Wars films, it just falls flat in a lot of areas.
Yeah, and again, this is this thing with me where, like, I consider Empire Strikes Back to be one of the greatest movies ever made. It's certainly my favorite movie of all time. So I kind of have a high bar for what I'm looking for in a Star Wars movie. And, you don't have to give me what I already saw, because I've watched A New Hope literally 100 times. I don't need to see it 101st in a different format. And I might have been more open to it if they were more honest. Like, hey, we're rebooting Star Wars. And I'm like, okay, that might be cool. But you kind of hit it behind this shield of it's Episode 7. Which is, just be honest about what it is. No one seems to want to admit that. And the people who do just kind of brush it off. Which just, I don't know, just doesn't sit well with me. Because if this was any other movie, it's like, it would have been torn to shreds for being a rehash.
Yeah.
But because it's Star Wars, and because people didn't like the prequels, and we haven't gotten a proper quote-unquote Star Wars movie in like 30 years, people were satisfied with this. And it's just like, demand more. There's nothing wrong with wanting something more than what this movie was.
Yeah. It also kind of makes me wonder exactly what they're going to do in the next movie, because let's just look at something here. Kylo Ren's ass was beat.
He may or may not have lost a limb. It wasn't entirely clear either.
Death Star 3.0 was completely destroyed. What do they have left? Are they just
Death
gonna
Star
build
4.0?
Are they just gonna build another Death Star? Well, this one was 30 times bigger than the other Death Star. Let's make it 50 times bigger. Maybe
the
that'll
funny
work.
thing about like the various Death Stars is that like Death Stars 1 and 2 were both actually fairly distinct in like both their function and their like use. Like Death Star 1 was explicitly like a tool of fear. Like they're like trying to like market that as like, okay, this will crush their building because they'll be like so terrified of this fucking monstrosity. And it had like a weakness in its exhaust port. Death Star 2 was entirely meant to like just draw them out. Like the entire point of it was like, oh hey, here's another Death Star, guys, come and get it.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah. Whereas this is just like, oh hey, here's our fucking big dumb super weapon that's...
It was in the first movie, so I guess we gotta have it in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we were fanboys of the old Empire, so we'll just repeat their mistakes. That's basically what it came down to.
Yeah. And like even the ways they fucking destroyed the first two Death Stars are completely like different from one another, whereas this is just like a repeat of the first trench run.
Yeah.
Literally just another fucking trench run.
It's
It's
the
like-
exact same thing.
There were two moments in this movie where I rolled my eyes. One was at the beginning of the movie where he put the plans into the droid, and I'm like, here we fucking go. And then the second was when it was just literal Death Star trench run.
You know where I actually also rolled my eyes myself was when near the beginning of the movie when Rey is scavenging and she just is sitting right next to a downed, what is it, AT-AT?
Yeah, I think it was implied that's where she lives.
I guess it's just like I know what you're doing.
I kind of smiled at that because that's my favorite Star Wars vehicle, and I'm glad it was in the movie in some form. I did hate the fact that she put on that stupid helmet and then ate food, which looked really stupid. I don't know what the point of that was, other than just like, hey, here's more nostalgia. It's a Rebel Star Pilot helmet.
And then Finn just leaning casually on the thing, and oh, here's a chest thing. Remember
yeah,
that?
but I would have been fine. Like, those are like nice little nods.
They're
like
nods.
wink,
but
wink.
But when you look at the movie as a whole and how many like blatant references there are, it does like it makes me wonder: is this a nod or is this just
No, it's a
pandering?
rehash. Yeah, it's absolutely totally pandering, and that was my thing too. It's like a few nods here and there. That would have been enough for me. I love that kind of stuff when it's done,
Yeah.
in check. But it went overboard to where they like it wasn't just a nod. It was like a guy sitting next to you, like hitting his elbow into your side every 5 seconds. It's like, remember Star Wars?
Is there a trash compactor on this ship?
Yeah, it's like in context, if that had been like one of like 5 nods to the original movie, it's like that's funny. But
Yeah.
like when it came at the end of all these other ones, it's just like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to comment on that I was surprised by, because this was one of my biggest fears going into this movie, and I kind of got that from the trailers, is that I was wondering if this would have the tone and look of a Star Wars film. I felt that the trailers were kind of cut in a way that, aside from the music, didn't really invoke a lot of what Star Wars looked like.
Mm-hmm.
But like as soon as this movie starts, and you see the stormtroopers in their stupid clunky outfit walk off that like dropship, and like waddle off into battle, and it's like, yep, this is Star Wars. So that was nice to see. Like other than like those moments of like kind of dialogue and over the top acting that felt a little out of place in Star Wars, like this was very much a Star Wars movie. I was happy for that. I was happy that they didn't try to modernize Star Wars.
Yeah.
It feels like, you know, if you watch this alongside the other ones, it feels perfectly in place.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm glad they at least hit that.
It definitely feels like it definitely feels like a Star Wars movie.
Like,
It doesn't feel like something trying to be a Star Wars movie.
Yes.
one thing that did irk me about that first scene though is like it was a really minor nitpick like that I have with it. It's like it's that one point where Poe is basically just kneeling before Kylo Ren, and I just felt it was very kind of off for like Kylo Ren to like just let him fucking mouth off to him like in light of like what his character is throughout the whole movie. It just kind of felt like weird to me. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a bit. There's one point about this movie that we haven't even touched on, that I think is important.
Hmm.
What do you think I'm going to say, Matt?
Han Solo's death.
So,
Oh God, we haven't talked about that.
so first and foremost,
no. Hang on. We'll get to that. I wanted to talk about the music actually.
Oh,
Because Star Wars has some of the best movie scores of any film ever.
And then there's this.
And then there's this, where it's like at no point in the movie is the music distracting. It feels like Star Wars, but there's also nothing that stands out. I couldn't for the life of me remember a single piece of music other than the stuff that was borrowed from the original movies.
yeah.
This movie doesn't have, like, all the other movies, save for maybe Jedi, have, like, a theme, a definitive theme. This movie has nothing like that.
But Steve, Jedi has
I don't
Jedi
want to
rocks.
accuse John Williams of phoning it in, but John Williams phoned this thing in.
Yeah.
What was that, Mule?
Steve, Jedi has Jedi rocks.
Yeah, there are actually times, like, you said, like, I remember you talking about that before I saw the movie, and I went into the movie, like, thinking, okay, excuse me, okay, I'm actually gonna try and see if there's any music in this that is actually memorable, and I watched it, and now I'm like, I don't remember anything from this movie, musically.
Yeah.
There's
And
not a
it's
single...
really weird.
It all just feels like kind of... It definitely feels just kind of really... generic. I don't remember a
Yeah,
single
it's
track.
dramatic and bombastic, but it's generic.
Like, I don't remember, like, did Kylo Ren have a theme?
He probably did, but, like, fuck if I know what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about, like, Rey's theme being the one that's the one I see people mention. I can't remember it.
She had a theme?
Yeah, she did. It's like,
Did Finn have a
like
theme?
the other day I went and I listened to the entire soundtrack on YouTube, and it's like, yeah, I kind of remember that, but I mean, it didn't stick with me after I stopped listening to it.
Yeah.
There's no definitive theme here, which is like one of the themes of John
There's
Williams's
definitely no...
scores.
There's definitely no Imperial March in this one.
Well, there is
Well,
the one brief part they had it when they showed Darth Vader's helmet, but there's no equivalent to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so jarring too, because like virtually all of the other films have like some sort of actual tracks to like kind of tie into that film.
Yeah.
Exclusively. Like with the whole with the prequels, you have like the fucking Duel of the Fates, you have Battle of the Heroes, you have Anakin's theme, you've got the Padme Anakin love theme. Like,
Yeah, it's like I can't name all the tracks in the prequels, but I can remember them in my head.
yeah,
And I mean, a lot of that comes with like I played a lot of video games with them in it as well.
but still,
I heard them a lot, but
they
like
stick with you.
yeah, it's like you were like they stuck with me after I watched the movie, whereas this didn't have any of that. It's just, I think that was the most frustrating point of this movie to me, because it's like, well, you know, if not a great movie, but like I was always counting on the score to be good, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Han Solo's death.
So, to start us off, did Kylo Ren really need to stab him before pushing him off of a bridge?
Yes, he's
Why do
he's
no
Admiral
bridges in the
Bad
Star
Guy.
Wars universe have guardrails?
Yeah, they just don't.
The Empire / First Order, they don't really have building codes, so they just ignore that shit because they're the bad guys.
Yeah, I will say, I actually really liked that scene. I thought it was...
Yes.
I liked it a lot.
I think Harrison Ford sells that scene.
It's-
That's part of why it works.
Yeah, it was probably the best scene in the whole movie.
Yeah, and that's another point I wanted to make, is that, like, a big problem with this movie is, like, people are like, I love this movie, and it's like, what part did you like? And it's like, well, you know, this movie doesn't have, like, this movie's defining scene is that death, is Han Solo's death, and it's that defining scene just because Han Solo dies.
Mhm.
It's a nice scene, it's the best one in the movie, but it's like, there's no moment of, like, Darth Maul extending both ends of his, like, dual-bladed lightsaber and then having this epic, like, long lightsaber fight across, like, multiple parts of this building that was really hype, and you have Duel of Fates in the background, and everyone, like, even people who hate Phantom Menace are like, yeah, that scene's fucking great.
And
This movie does not have a standout scene.
yeah, like even
which is
like
really weird.
even like the worst Star Wars movies, like even like Phantom Menace, like there's the pod racing scene, there's fighting,
There's a Duel of the Fates
there's
scene
Duel of
and the
the
pod
Fates,
racing scene.
there's pod racing. I'm
Um,
sure there's
episode-
something else.
I mean,
but
like,
Episode 2 has Yoda whipping out the lightsaber for the first time.
there's
It's like,
the whole,
I don't care what you say about Episode 2, that scene was fucking awesome the
episode
first
2
time
has
I
the
saw it.
unveiling of the clone army.
yeah, and
like
it has
the entire scene in that Coliseum.
Yeah.
yeah, the
was a great
Coliseum
scene.
theme I was about to say. And then
Yeah.
three has a
3 has
has
the
a-
entire like fight over Coruscant.
yeah, it has a there's a
It
lot of
had-
moments in 3, I think.
Yeah. There is, and that's why I think, like, when people say the prequels are shit, well, it's like, you can't really say all of them. Like, you can't lump them together like that. You gotta judge them individually, because I think Episode 3 is very much a good movie.
Yeah.
It's definitely significantly better than the first two.
It has
Yes.
some really bad dialogue and some poor acting, but aside, like, it has an actual good story like underneath all that.
Yeah. And it's like, I think Lucas clearly listened to the criticisms of the first two and addressed them in that third movie.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot less of that stuff in it. But I mean, like, this Episode 7, it's just like, I want... What's the standout scenes? Like, you have this weird scene on this, like, freighter with these weird Men in Black 2 aliens chasing Han Solo and Chewbacca and tentacle rape, and, like, it was okay, I guess?
That was a very
you have-
yeah.
You have the Death Star trench run again. They blew up a planet again.
And it was
this is the second movie that J.J. Abrams has blown up an entire planet.
Like, the only
Um,
particularly like exciting scenes, like the one they showed in the trailer, where like they were like flying through the remains of the Star Destroyer.
Yes, yeah, that was because I think that could have been an iconic scene
Yeah,
if it just wasn't everywhere before the movie came out.
exactly.
And even then, it's like she flies through it for like 10 seconds. It's cool, I guess, but
Mm-hmm. And it's not even close to like it's kind of like the Return of the Jedi at the very end where they're flying
where they
through
fly through the Death Star.
the Death Star. It's kind of the same thing, only that was a lot more cool in Return of the Jedi because the stakes
And
were a lot
dramatic.
higher.
Yes.
And in this, it was like what two? It was just two TIE fighters. That's it.
Yeah, and then you get the obligatory end lightsaber fight that, like, we've gone over why that was weird for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And it just involved a bunch of characters that we really didn't ultimately care all that strongly about.
Mm.
Oh
we didn't.
So-
We haven't talked about Traitor yet.
God! How can we not mention Traitor? I think people go a bit overboard with this meme, but it is funny. Just people typing Traitor.
I did like that moment. Just because it made it very clear that Finn. That's one thing is this movie makes it abundantly clear that Finn is not a Mary Sue at all.
No,
he
should have been the Luke.
He gets his ass beat like crazy. He gets his ass beat by just a random stormtrooper.
Yes, who had a weapon designed specifically to counter him in an era where no one uses lightsabers.
Another
Yeah,
thing I
and
really
so
like
is-
about that scene is like it actually like kind of shows a sense of like personality from like stormtroopers. Like you never
Uh-huh.
really get a sense like of their opinions of things. Whereas like that like one fucking stormtrooper who just like decides I'm gonna take this guy with the lightsaber 1v1. It's like just he embodies like that sort of like kind of unseen mentality that you never really get in any of these films in a way that like we never really see.
Yeah, I love how, like, it's not entirely related to that, but there's a scene earlier in the movie where Finn takes off his helmet and Captain Phasma's like, "Put back on your helmet. No one told you that you could take it off." And it's like they kind of get it. Like, stormtroopers are faceless, nameless people. But again, like, they'll kind of seem like that scene did stand out a bit for a good reason and bad reason.
What was the bad reason?
The bad reason is that, like, you have this character with a weapon that can specifically counter lightsabers, and he's the only one deployed with a melee weapon.
I mean,
Because
he's
like,
the
why
one
would
who
you
needs it.
why would you send someone with a melee weapon to a blaster fight? It doesn't make any sense unless it's a lightsaber. So it's that scene was in there just to be cool, and I guess it's one of those things that people say, no, don't think about it too much, don't analyze it. But
Well, you
It
see,
should've-
Steve, they did that so like he could beat up Finn and then get shot by Han Solo immediately after.
It should have also been Captain Phasma instead of
yes,
Random
they should
dude.
have done something with her, anything with her.
Just so she had something to do.
Yeah. Are we missing anything from this movie? I've gone over most of the notes I think I have here. I did find it a little weird that, like, in the lightsaber fights at the end, like, people just kept getting glancing non-fatal lightsaber blows. I saw Max Landis bring this up, and I thought it was a really good point. It's really weird, like, they have these lightsaber fights where, like, no one really gets seriously injured.
I mean,
it felt really limp. It felt kind of like PG. Whereas, like, in the prequels, people, like, Count Dooku gets his hands chopped off and then he's decapitated by Anakin. It's like, this is a far departure from that.
Well, I think
it's funny too because like I do think it kind of works in the case of like Kylo Ben versus Finn, because like he's basically just fucking toying with him the entire time. Like, sure, Finn's like a trained stormtrooper, but he's still no Jedi.
Yes.
So it's like that makes sense that he's just like fucking with him. But like with him versus like Rey, it's just like the most awful shit. Because like there is no reason that there shouldn't be any sort of like lasting wound on either side there. I mean, yeah, like Finn gets like cut, like his back sliced open by a lightsaber, but like
we don't really see that.
Yeah, we like see it from like the other side, so it's like,
and we know he'll be completely fine anyways.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want to touch on before we wrap this up?
Traitor!
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's fine to put out there that I think this is like it's an okay movie. It has a lot of problems with it that I think should be addressed by people, and I do honestly, I think this is it's going to be one of those movies that like in a year, 2 years, 3 years, people will look back on and like it won't be remembered as fondly as it is right now.
It's not gonna hold up.
Like this is very much going to be kind of like the next Avatar. Do you remember Avatar?
Oh, yeah.
When people like that made the most money of any movie ever, and people was like, "Boy, that movie was great." But they were still like, a lot of those people at the time, there was like, you know what, that movie was kind of nothing, and people were like, "No, shut up! It was fun. It was a great experience."
It was Pocahontas.
And like,
And then
6 years later, no one talks about Avatar.
Yeah.
So I do hope that people will look back on this movie with a bit more of a critical eye. It's very possible that the 8 and 9 could address and rectify some of the issues in this movie. But it will never change the fact that those problems weren't addressed in the original film.
The fact
like they should have done.
I am very, very happy that the next two films are going to have completely different directors. Because it really needs it.
I'm worried about 9 though, considering it's directed by the guy who directed Jurassic World.
But he did a fine job with that. We'll see. I do like I like the fact that like as much problems we have with this movie, it's very much limited to this movie. It doesn't seem to fuck up a lot for the films going forward, which is one of my big worries about this movie. That's like J.J. Abrams would scorch the earth.
Wait.
And
the guy
who's
who's directing episode 8 did Looper.
Yep.
Yes.
Fuck my life. This movie's gonna suck.
You don't like Looper?
I've
never seen
Looper.
it. But...
It was bad.
Oh my god. Colin gave him a very glowing review.
Oh my god. He also directed the classic Breaking Bad episode Ozymandias. So maybe there is hope after all.
Maybe there is. He's not only directing it, he is also writing the next movie.
Yeah.
So it's not.
But he also wrote and directed Looper. So I mean, what are you gonna do?
He also wrote and directed Evil Demon Golf Ball from Hell.
What is that?
I don't know what that is, but it sounds cool.
It's a short film.
Fuck.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. Final thoughts? Okay, movie.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
serviceable film.
Despite all the very clear issues with it, and despite the fact that there's a lot of nitpicks that can be said about it, it's a fun movie. It's a good movie. I'd recommend it.
Okay. Frank, you want to give the final word?
Yeah, it's shit. 0 out of 10. And if I ever catch any one of you assholes calling Ray and Mary Sue again, I swear to God, I will personally hunt each and every one of you down. Okay? SJW for life. Preach.